in fact stood down as the Democratic Party's presidential candidate for the forthcoming elections. This move comes following his party members losing faith in his mental stability and lack of confidence to beat his opponent Donald Trump. Joe Biden has now extended his support to Vice President Kamala Harris to run for the president against Trump. He said that it is in the best interest of his party and the country that he stands down and focuses solely on fulfilling his duties as president for the remaining term. That's, of course, the latest that's coming in at this point of time. I even have the letter that has been issued by US President Joe Biden. And if I could request my PCR to essentially show what I have over here for our viewers. It's, of course, a letter that has been penned by US President Joe Biden. I'm going to quickly start reading what exactly is stated over here. He said, over the past 3.5 years, we've made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug cost for seniors and expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. That's, of course, the latest that's coming in at this point in time. In fact, joining us at this point in time is Mr. Bob Lancia, former member of the Rhode Island House of Representatives from the 16th District Political Party. And also with us on the broadcast is Mr. Spencer Critchley, political analyst. All right, I'm going to start this conversation, and I'd love to rope in Mr. Spencer Critchley into the broadcast. So how do you view this a decision that has been made clear, the fact that Joe Biden wants to step down, and he's in fact endorsed Kamala Harris's name to become and in fact to be nominated?
I think the decision by President Biden was a deeply patriotic act of public service that I think really can set an example for all Americans today, and really for the ages. It ranks among some of the most selfless acts of U.S. presidents or other elected officials that we can point to in our history, going back to perhaps the original model, George Washington, who declined to stay in office when he could have ruled really as an emperor. He was so popular back at the founding of the country. So as painful as this decision has been, and as much turmoil as there has been in the party for the past 3 weeks, I think this really is, as I say, an example of patriotism and public service. And it appears that members of the Democratic Party and others, including many Republicans who are supporting the Democratic ticket this time because of their concern over the threat to democracy, have perceived it that way. Because instead of turmoil, we suddenly seem to be seeing a wave of enthusiasm and unity across the country.
Right, absolutely. I'd in fact now like to rope in Mr. Bob Lancia into the broadcast. So, you know, a number of times there have been statements that have been made that US President Joe Biden is mentally not doing so well, and he's also very old. That is a number of times Donald Trump has raised that statement. Now, with Kamala Harris perhaps coming into the picture, she's much younger by age. How do the Republicans then view this?
Hi, good evening. It's been quite the whirlwind today, obviously. I was actually at a parade this morning, marching in a parade. I got home, turned on the television, I heard that the president was not going to run for re-election, and there was a few minutes there where they were wondering if he was going to support Kamala Harris, and he did come out with a statement a little later. You know, here in the States, we have our red states and our blue states. And Rhode Island is a very blue state, and I think there was a lot of excitement here today that Kamala Harris may be on top of the ticket, and there's even talk about possibly it being a two-female ticket, which would really create quite the interesting scenario. And I'm actually talking to one of the top possible gubernatorial candidates here in Rhode Island, and she's going to be heading out to the convention in August, and she said she's very excited about the developments, and she's looking forward to being out in Chicago for this historic moment. So it's going to be interesting to watch. but certainly here in this Northeast region as a whole, these 6 states here in New England, it's very blue, and I think there's a lot of excitement about what's happened today.
Right, absolutely. Requesting both our guests to stay on with us as we shift our focus to some more breaking news coming in at this point of time. Now, Donald Trump has reacted to Joe Biden stepping down and said that Kamala Harris would be easier to defeat than Trump. Now, Trump also called Biden the worst president in the history of America. Moreover, he called Biden a crooked man who is not fit to serve as a president. So that's, of course, the latest that's coming in at this point of time. Mr. Critchley with us on the broadcast, sir. Of course, right after the assassination attempt, former U.S. President Donald Trump had gone to Milwaukee, and he'd in fact laid out his vision to make America great again. How does then Kamala Harris, how do you think Kamala Harris will be able to then defeat or in fact put up a bigger and a brighter vision for the country?
I think she's very well equipped to do that, as she's shown over her career. And as I'm not the first to note, it will be a case of a prosecutor campaigning against a convicted felon. When Kamala Harris was in the U.S. Senate, one of her greatest skills was in conducting hearings and defeating people appearing before her who were trying to create wiggle room around the truth. So I think it will be a competition that former President Trump should not welcome, and I'm sure does not welcome. As we see from that statement of his, the contrast between, as I say, the act of selfless public service we just saw and the record that Kamala Harris will be able to run on is a contrast that any candidate should be able to make, let alone one with the skills of Kamala Harris, because really the overwhelming problem with President Trump is he's just grotesquely unfit for any position of responsibility. We must always remind ourselves this is a man who tried to overthrow our democracy on top of all the other things we could point to that he's done, and who continues to do that by continuing to lie about the results of the last election, which is perhaps one of the most dangerous things you can do in a democracy, is to undermine the integrity of elections groundlessly. So Kamala Harris is more qualified to be president simply by being a patriot who believes in democracy, as opposed to an extremely dishonest would-be autocrat. But on top of that, as I say, she has a record of accomplishment going back decades, and yet remains youthful, and it now becomes former President Trump who has the issue with age and apparently, clearly faltering cognitive abilities.
Right, absolutely. Requesting you to stay on with us as we shift our focus to some more breaking news coming in on the same front. Now, former U.S. President Barack Obama has praised Joe Biden for his decision of dropping out of the presidential race. In a statement, he said that Biden's actions have once again reminded people that he is a patriot of the highest order. However, Obama has not made it clear whether he is going to be supporting Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. All right. Still with us, of course, on the broadcast is Mr. Bob Lancia. Of course, there was a lot of support that was extended by Obama, Mr. Barack Obama to U.S. President Joe Biden. But of course, he's now issued this statement. Now, do you think, whether it's him or it's Nancy Pelosi revoking that kind of support, do you think that's also sort of led him to this decision?
Well, I actually, absolutely. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of discussion going on, a lot of behind the scenes discussion. And I think for the most part, they've kept it behind closed doors, which I think is a good thing. You don't need to air the dirty laundry or whatever. Make your decisions and, you work within your own group and setting. I think a lot right now, they're talking, first of all, about the money that the president has in his campaign war chest. Can she use it directly? Does it have to be returned to the donors? His donations obviously were drying up, and there seems to be a renewed excitement with Kamala Harris possibly being the pick, and I think the money will begin to flow again. I think also it's going to be important who she picks as the vice president. I think that's going to play in very much so. And I really think that, there's not a lot of time. So she's got to get her apparatus in place and be ready to go. And so there's a lot of moving parts right now. But there is time. There's still a month to the convention. So they start getting things together. I think it was good if they were going to make a decision to make it now to allow enough time to get things in place for the convention a month from now. As I said, one of the potential gubernatorial candidates here is very excited about going out to Chicago. And so I think there'll be a lot more excitement. And I think with the time they have, there'll be a lot more time to put things together. And I think things will be a little bit more cohesive come the convention. Had he not, stepped out way right now and had waited, I think might have been a bit more chaos. So I think his timing was good to do it actually this weekend. That gives them a month to kind of put things together, decide perhaps on a vice presidential candidate. Again, to continue to generate excitement, and we'll see what happens.
Right, absolutely. In fact, requesting you to stay on with us. More breaking news coming in on the same front, where U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson has called on U.S. President Joe Biden to resign from his post immediately, saying that he is not fit enough to run for president, then he is not enough to serve as the U.S. president. He said that Biden must resign the office immediately, and November 5th cannot arrive soon enough. Johnson also slammed Biden's decision to put forward Kamala Harris as a nominee and accused her of mishandling the U.S. border crisis. Mr. Spencer Critchley is still with us on the broadcast. And sir, I would like to understand your perspectives on such statements that are coming in at this point of time. As far as immigration is concerned, there are a lot of people in the U.S. who have, in fact, raised their concerns over it. How do you view these statements?
Yes, well, it's not surprising to hear that coming from Speaker Johnson, not just because it's predictable, given that he is the Republican Speaker of the House and is a very strong opponent of President Biden and all things Democratic, but that is a point of logic that actually does need to be addressed by President Biden when he speaks to the nation about his decision later this week. That point being, if he feels that he's not able to run for president during the campaign, does that mean he somehow feels capable of continuing as president? However, we don't know that he's going to say that he's resigning because of health concerns. We'll have to wait to see what it was that led him to come to this decision. In any case, I think that question can be answered. Choosing not to run a campaign does not necessarily, in my view, require that he should resign from the presidency, especially given that one of the things that's become more clear to the American people, which is kind of a silver lining of all of the turmoil over the past few weeks since the debate at which President Biden had such extreme difficulty, is that it's become clear just how successful his presidency has been to more and more Americans. It's really one of the most successful presidencies in modern times, I think, going back certainly to Lyndon Johnson and in some ways back to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The list of accomplishments that he's managed, including passing major bipartisan legislation during a time of extreme division between the parties, has been truly remarkable. And it's for quite a while, it was frustrating for Democrats that people did not seem to be aware of his incredible accomplishments, beginning with preventing potentially hundreds of thousands of more deaths during the COVID epidemic, which had been badly bungled by President Trump, despite the development of some miraculous vaccines which occurred during his presidency. But there he was denying it was a problem or recommending people experiment with injecting bleach as a possible solution, et cetera, et cetera. There was the soft landing from what was threatening to be another depression. It's easy to forget this was just 3.5 years ago. And then people were predicting runaway inflation. Inflation certainly did rise, but it's been declining now. for a very long time and is approaching historically low rates. I mentioned the major bipartisan legislation. There was his response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the marshaling of 50 NATO countries and other allies. It's really been a remarkable presidency. So I think that, that is perhaps the strongest response to the point that Speaker Johnson raises. I don't think we want this president to just resign on the spot, no matter what the reason is for his deciding not to run again.
Right, absolutely. Requesting you to stay on with us because more breaking news is coming in at this point of time. Former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has come out in support of Joe Biden and said that he is a patriotic American who has always put the country first. She stated that Biden's legacy of vision, values, and leadership make him one of the most consequential president in American history. She also expressed love and gratitude for Biden and said that God blessed America with Joe Biden's greatness and godness. Still with us on the broadcast, of course, is Mr. Critchley. Now, sir, of course, there's a lot of support that's being extended to U.S. President Joe Biden for this decision. But, the question that looms large at this point of time is that if he is endorsing Kamala Harris to nominate herself as for the U.S. presidential elections, and the big question that arises is who then takes up the position of the vice president. How do you view this?
Well, I think, there's a lot of strategy that goes into this kind of thinking. Sometimes I think people overthink this sort of decision, and it usually works out well if you choose the best person you can possibly find in terms of qualifications, knowledge, and character. As hard as it can be for people to believe that that's true, sometimes the simplest answer is the best, which, as I say, is choose somebody who has great character, great knowledge, and great qualifications. And I think there are several excellent choices that she could choose from. Now, there will, of course, have to be some political calculations that go into this, especially in thinking about the challenge of winning in the crucial battleground states, which I think, unfortunately, have overwhelming influence on the outcome of U.S. elections at the expense of people in the other 40-plus states that don't happen to be battlegrounds. But that's the electoral system we have at the moment. And so I think she will, of course, have to take into account choosing somebody who politically complements her. It would be wonderful if it was purely a question of merit, and if that meant we ended up with two women on the ticket, that would be terrific. I think it's likely, given political realities, that she'll be looking for a male counterpart and somebody, as I say, who perhaps complements her and adds complementary strengths to the ticket in order to widen the appeal of the combination as much as possible.
Right, absolutely. More breaking news coming in at this point of time, where former Republican candidate Vivek Ramaswamy has also reacted to Biden stepping down and endorsing Harris and said that they are not running against a candidate, they are running against a system. In fact, I'm going to take this conversation forward with Mr. Bob Lansey. And so, I'd like to understand from you, why do you feel that, Vivek Ramaswamy thinks that they're not just running against a candidate, they're running against a system. What does he mean when he makes such statements?
Well, I think, for sure, to the point that our other gentleman just made, certainly there's still a lot on the table, a lot that's being worked on. I don't know how much will be accomplished between now, of course, and Election Day. But I think strategically right now, choosing, yes, the best running mate, I think, is primary, getting her apparatus in order and going from there. They did mention Sherrod Brown, who was the other senator from Ohio, to, I guess, face off against J.D. Vance. Again, the battleground states, the Midwest, the Rust Belt. So we'll see on that. But certainly Gretchen Whitmer, the governor up in Michigan, is certainly an excellent candidate. Even our own governor here in Rhode Island, former governor, who's now the Commerce Secretary, his name has been mentioned, Gina Raimondo. And she, of course, was supported by Michael Bloomberg herself. So, she's an interesting candidate. She's traveled the world. She's done a lot of great things as Commerce Secretary. She's been over to China. She's been visiting the Asian countries. So, there's talk about her possibly being a vice presidential running mate, which would kind of make Rhode Island proud. But I think certainly at this point in time, I just happen to have an opportunity to watch the speech by Lyndon Baines Johnson when he said he wasn't going to run. But what he did say is, I'm going to focus on my job the rest of my term. And certainly I could see that being President Biden's message when he speaks to the nation. I'm going to focus on my job for the rest of my term and kind of clear the decks. And I think that's reasonable. And certainly, as previously said, we had Franklin Delano Roosevelt, we had, former President Woodrow Wilson, and even Ronald Reagan. I mean, they talked about toward the end of his time, he was in a position vulnerable. So, I mean, it's not unprecedented that the presidents have finished out their terms with a lot of help, maybe from their spouses. Certainly, they talked about Dr. Jill Biden being a very powerful influence with her husband. So, strong women behind the strong men. So I think there's an element of that as well.
All right. With that, I'd like to thank both our guests for joining us on the broadcast, sharing their perspectives with our viewers. In fact, we also have several reactions coming in on the recent developments in Americans' presidential elections. Take a listen.
To step down, I respect his decision, even though I wanted him to run. And I felt that we could win with President Biden in November. But he has decided to step down, and I respect his decision. Well, we still have about 4 months left to election. And Kamala Harris, who would be the nominee, I anticipate Kamala Harris will be the next presidential nominee. And people already know Kamala Harris. She has seen her work. People have seen she has been a great partner to President Biden. And I think people would support her wholeheartedly.
This very well could be a game changer. If we look at the 2020 election, you saw the Indian American community energized in a very significant way, both in terms of voters, but also in terms of donors. And I think the parallels are very similar because there wasn't as much enthusiasm and support for Harris when she was a candidate for the presidency in 2019. Indian Americans knew who she was, but it was primarily Indian Americans in California who knew her better than Indian Americans across the country. But when she became the vice presidential pick, there was an outpouring of enthusiasm and support that carried her through and the Biden-Harris ticket through the November election.
I think that Joe Biden today showed what a true America First policy looks like in putting the country above himself, stepping aside as Democratic nominee for the presidency. Joe Biden has had one of the most distinguished careers of public service of anybody in this country. And as president, he accomplished more in 4 years than what a lot of presidents have accomplished in 8. We can talk about his work with regard to the bipartisan infrastructure deal, his work in improving our healthcare system and access to life-saving drugs, or his work with regard to climate change, or reviving our semiconductor industry. Those will go down as tremendous accomplishments.